Austin Bursavich versus Bryan Santiago. Winner here with an excellent shot of making top 8. Except for not a guarantee, but they are a strong favorite for it. Bursavich winning the die roll. He'll be on the play with Mishra's Bauble.
Being on the play certainly helps a lot in these creature-heavy matchups.
Ryan, we saw him bauble his opponent. Is that pretty standard that you're always going to go with the other player?
Well, if you're going to crack a fetch land and or look at your opponent's hand, which I believe Austin is going to do both of those things, and the top of their deck has much more valuable information than the top of yours.
The reason you might bauble yourself if you have a fetch land but weren't certain if you wanted to crack it.
Right. Maybe you don't know if you're going to hit your second land drop. There's a particular spell that you want to draw.
So bauble, the fetch and shock will send Austin down to 17, and Inquisition of Kozilek will get a look at his opponent's hand. So then we see looks like a 3-land hand, an island and 2 Mutavaults. That part's pretty good. Off that, Spreading Seas, Marrow Regery, Vapor Snag, and Master of the Pearl Trident. A pretty good hand for Bryan Santiago.
Vapor Snag not terribly good in this matchup just because the creatures are so efficient from the other side. You have to be ahead on board. It's really a question of how well Austin can police the Merfolk. And currently, it's going to take a while for Bryan to cast any of these spells. There's a good chance that Austin's going to be looking at that Spreading Seas here, depending on how many lands he has and how much spot removal he has.
Yeah, right, there's no double blue, so turn 2 Master of the Pearl Trident not really there. Though Bryan does get to set up with multiple copies of Mutavault. Now, Vapor Snag is a 2-of in Santiago's deck.
If you're able to keep things at parity, Vapor Snag can push you very far ahead. But the Death Shadow deck's going to try to play this attrition game against you. And if Merfolk can't draw Silvergill Adepts, it's really hard for them to compete on that axis.
Austin says go and draws a card off his bauble. He selected the Spreading Seas. And for Santiago, he casts Curse Catcher. So that one, Austin, as Austin knows, was off the top. And he'll go back to him. Now he looks to put a creature onto the board. You see Tarmogoyf, Tarfire, Death Shadow all in Austin's hand.
And Inquisition for Spreading Seas also pumps Tarmogoyf. That's an enchantment.
Yeah, and it's actually unusual to get an enchantment in the graveyard in this matchup. So a win there for Austin.
Currently, sorcery, land, artifact, enchantment. No creatures yet, already a 4/5, no instants, and Austin has a Tarfire in hand.
Oh, tribal and instant. He fetched shocks down to 14, trying to get in range for that Death Shadow. See, doing some quick math here. Looks like his choices are Tarmogoyf, and the other option would be Traverse plus Tarfire. He'll go with the Goyf.
Getting the Goyf on the table makes a lot of sense, in particular because you know about that Vapor Snag.
Sure.
Just get on the table, start applying pressure that way.
So go back to Santiago, hand of 2 Mutavaults, Vapor Snag, Regery, Master of the Pearl Trident. It looks like he picked up a copy of Ether Vial for the turn. He'll go ahead and cast that off the colorless land.
Would have been a nice one on turn 1.
Even now it's okay. It was pretty free, as he didn't really have a way to spend this colorless mana otherwise.
Yeah, he couldn't really cast a different spell. The only thing he had access to was Vapor Snag, so he's using his mana. Possible that he would have preferred to have drawn an island or a Silvergill Adept on that turn. Certainly a Silvergill Adept.
Yeah, that goes without saying. You go back to Austin, draws another fetch land. So now he can get himself below 13 if he wants. That pivotal point where he can start casting cards like Death Shadow. Looks his hand, he has Inquisition, Tarfire, Death Shadow, Traverse, Land.
Austin already knows about 2 Lords, and for that reason using the Tarfire to deal with the Curse Catcher is not terribly inviting.
Actually, it looks like maybe misspoke on one of those. We have Liliana the Last Hope here.
That one's real good against Curse Catcher.
A swing with Tarmogoyf. It's a 4/5 at the moment. Santiago will take the damage. He drops to 16.
And attacking first here makes it less likely he gets Vapor Snagged. Bryan doesn't know that he's going to cast this Planeswalker here, so he gets that hit in before he shows Bryan his Planeswalker.
So I'm interested with this Bloodstained Mire to see whether Austin gets a basic or a shock land. He actually is just going to go for a basic, brings him to 13 to cast Liliana.
Yeah, you know, the Vapor Snag is already going to make Death Shadow live.
Sure, he loses 1 life when he casts it. And here will be Liliana the Last Hope. The 3-mana Planeswalker that cannot be hit by Curse Catcher, so it will plus and just eliminate the Merfolk. Good start here for Bursavich. Now has control of the board, a creature and a planeswalker to just Mutavault.
This is a real strength of Liliana the Last Hope in Modern. Anytime you can kill an X1 creature immediately is so powerful. You see, Bryan has a Mutavault. If this was the Liliana of the Veil, then he'd be able to make some inroads on that.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of matchups right now where I think it's good. Noble Hierarch has been a long time since it's seen this much play. We're seeing a lot of that. I mean, Affinity, it's live there. It's good against Merfolk.
Yep.
Upkeep for Bryan. He'll put one counter on the Ether Vial. He did end step Vapor Snag away that Tarmogoyf.
Yep, just trying to stem the bleeding here, buy some time to start being able to actually develop a board presence.
Sure. Third land here. The second Mutavault. Has Regerie in hand that's castable, and looks like that will be the play. As he says go.
And the following turn he'll be able to start vialing in those double blue Merfolk.
Well, if he has cards left, Austin drawing a second Inquisition to go with his first one. So he'll start by leading on one Inquisition. He sees Tidebinder Mage and Master of the Pearl Trident. Now this will be interesting. He gets one of these. Austin can Inquisition the other one, but the price would be that he won't get to play Tarmogoyf if he does it. However, if he plays Tarmogoyf, it's very possible that that second Inquisition never does anything.
Exactly. It's the question of losing the tempo of playing Tarmogoyf now, losing the potential power of the Inquisition of Kozilek forever.
And there's some upside. What he might be able, he has a Tarfire, so he could just cast all these one-mana spells. Inquisition, Tarfire the Regerie.
Yeah, Lord's a totally acceptable target date with Tarfire. Makes a lot of sense to me to just fire the discard spell, use the Tarfire. The tempo advantage doesn't matter because Bryan's virtually out of resources. He'll just be left with Mutavaults from there.
Yeah, are you worried about losing then the Liliana to Mutavaults?
Well, you just plus it, so it only goes down to one.
Seems pretty reasonable. Austin can go fire off a second Inquisition of Kozilek. He'll get Bryan's last card. Liliana pluses up to 5, shrinking Regerie. And you see here, Austin's just going to actually say go. He has the Tarfire in hand, but not going to use it just yet. And maybe he will on upkeep, on second thought. He'll go ahead and Tarfire down the Regerie.
Getting a little fancy there for no reason.
I was like, I don't think that makes a difference.
Perhaps passed the turn and thought, wait a minute.
Wait, yeah. There's no way I'm not going to do this. Might as well. So Bryan draws a card here, and what off the top, but another Regerie. That's a fine hit for Santiago. You go back over to Bursavich.
I think that was a Colligan's command off the top.
Ooh. Liliana up to 6. We have Traverse the Ulfenvault and Tarmogoyf. He's going to cast Tarmogoyf. Now, he can't cast Traverse yet because he only has one green mana source.
So that Tarmogoyf builds him a very significant board presence, and that Liliana is getting dangerously close to going, -7, start making some zombies.
So keep in mind that 4 or 5 up at the top, not accurate. It is one thing because it is derived information. It is not their responsibility right now to fix it when it's wrong. They only will switch it when it actually matters to the game. If Austin attacks and then Bryan says no blocks, okay, then we'll see what it is. It looks like we have a 7-8, which... So you have all sorts of, we have tribal, we have instant, sorcery, land, creature, enchantment.
And Mishra's Bauble for
an
artifact.
artifact. So 7 card types. I suppose we don't have Planeswalker yet? Is that?
Nope. Once this Liliana -7s, could add that one to the mix.
That's it. That's the full set.
Austin winning this game on multiple axes.
Fourth land from Santiago in a pass can activate both Mutavaults, but no way to attack. Not into that huge Tarmogoyf.
All right, so the card that I saw in Bursavich's hand is actually Teamer Battle Rage.
Ooh. Okay, so not okay. So he's got...
Battle Rage is not the card that you want to draw when you're winning, but if you're winning, who cares?
Well, I mean, Tarmogoyf's a 7-8? Like hold on here. See an attack out of Tarmogoyf.
No, it's totally fine.
Yeah. It's when your Tarmogoyf is this big. It's
I'm saying the reason the card is in the deck to steal games when you're losing.
Oh yeah, I mean it's just gravy that he has one right now.
Right, exactly.
Ryan goes down to 9, no blocks. Traverse with Delirium from Bursavich. And that Teamer Battle Rage should be lethal next turn. Tarmogoyf would be appealing to get if he had another black mana. He doesn't right now.
Bursavich weighing a couple options. You see Gorklan, Rampager, Street Wraith, and Death Shadow pushed to the front. All totally serviceable options.
Looks like it's just Death Shadow. That's the only creature he can really get that he can cast this turn. I'll go for Gorklan Rampager, actually. Now, Austin is going to take some heat on the crackback.
Yeah, he's still at 12.
Yeah, has had a Death Shadow in hand, so he'll cast that.
Yeah, these creatures come at his life total. That means they're not going in as Liliana. You can make those zombies.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, what I like about the Death Shadow play here is that if Bryan's going to attack this turn, he better deal 12. Because if he does anything less, Death Shadow's killing him on the way back.
Right. That Rampager is face up. On top of that, Bursavich has the Teamer Battle Rage.
Yeah, things looking good here.
Bryan draws up to 1 card in hand, but he has a lot of problems that need solving, and Merfolk, not a deck generally well suited to do that kind of thing.
Checks cards in hand. Santiago, there's a red up. Austin does not actually have anything in play on this turn, but he is significantly ahead with just a Rejury in play. Unlikely Santiago can get a lethal attack this turn, and I don't think he's going to be able to stabilize through that Gorklan Rampager on the following.
Standard Classic players, please find your seats.
Can't really even survive Tarmogoyf Battle Rage.
Ends up saying go. Gonna have to play defense for a turn here.
Yeah, Austin doing a little check on Mirror Rejury plus Ether Vial. Retreat does require you to cast Merfolk spells.
Right, so if you Vial in a 2-drop Merfolk, you don't get to tap or untap anything.
Unless it's a Tidebinder Mage, then you get to tap a Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, Santiago actually did have that one main deck Tidebinder Mage. Not too bad in this matchup, however, with like most cards, it was just taken by an Inquisition.
Right. That's really the power of the Death Shadow deck. Sometimes you have a best deck that beats everything. The Death Shadow deck can beat anything. If you have enough discarded spells, targeted discarded spells, you just rip your opponent's hand apart. Doesn't really matter what the context of their deck is.
So Austin ultimated Liliana the Last Hope. That brings Tarmogoyf up to the full 8-9.
8-9 plus Teamer Battle Rage is 16 points of trample. Bryan's at 9. He has Mirror Rejury. He can fire up 2 Mutavaults. It's going to present 8 toughness.
You may not decide the outcome of this match by anything.
So Bryan doesn't know about the Battle Rage. He does know about the Rampager. So if he doesn't want to die to the Rampager, he would have to activate both Mutavaults. And it's kind of this nice bait play for Austin. So Bryan says, all right, I'll activate both Mutavaults, not die. And then Austin will say, oh, well, I have Battle Rage, so you do.
Kill all your stuff.
Also, you're not allowed to offer or ask for an offer.
Yeah, and you see that's the play. Ryan has to make this block to not die. And now Battle Rage is going to get him. He has 8 points of toughness if he blocks with everything. But even then, he's going to violin the Master of the Pearl Trident.
Think about
everything
Battle
in front
Rage.
of yeah.
You use your first strike to kill the Lords. Now that he has 2 Lords, though, that changes the math a little bit.
So let's see. Only kind of. So we have right now 2 4/4 Mutavaults and 2 3/3 Merfolk. He's going to order all the Lords first. And here's where the double strike part of Teamer Battle Rage is just going to be brutal.
Goyf is large enough to kill the 2 Lords on the first hit. They're only 6 total. It's a 6.
So Teamer Battle Rage, that's double strike. The first 8 points of damage are assigned 3 to the Lord, 3 to the Lord, 2 to the Mutavault. Then those die.
And
then,
Bryan's seen enough.
But so you'd say, well, the Mutavault's a 4/4. So the 8 damage is assigned. Then state-based effects start. Then we check before regular damage. The 2 Lords die. Then the Mutavault that was a 4/4 becomes a 2/2, so it dies. Then we look at regular damage. All right, well, it's going to hit 2 to the Mutavault, trample over for 6. So yeah, Bryan only goes to 3.
Yep.
But that's very dead.
Already 2 large creatures and 2 zombies on the way. Remember from the Liliana Ultimate. Merfolk deck way too far behind.
So game 1 goes to Austin Bursavich, and Death Shadow. They're going to get ready for a second game. Now, after the conclusion of this round, over at Star City on our Twitch stream where you guys are watching us, we have our Twitch subscription program. So here's how this works. When we go off the air at the end of this round, the players that we do, there's a lot of work as the players get a break before the top 8, and we get ready for that. So after we go off the air, the round 1 of the top 8 starts 1 hour after that. But before that, half an hour after we go, half an hour between, we will open up, post the bracket online, and we'll open up voting to see what match and what players you'd like to see. So if you're a subscriber over to our Twitch stream at twitch.tv/SCGTour, you get that 15-minute window to go ahead and vote. So once again, half an hour after we go off the air, voting is open for the match you want to see.
And as you've come to expect from modern events, looks like there's going to be several different decks in the top 8. I don't know. I think we're still live for 8 unique decks. I don't know if that's the case, but
I believe so. Yeah, we've had a real diversity of archetype here. Todd Stevens with green-white is going to be. Green-white Company is in. We do have one Merfolk player. That's Austin Grady. He's in the top 8. We will have an Ad Nauseam player now. Because at table 5, next to these players, we have Sky Goy and Ricky Lin playing the Ad Nauseam Mirror to make it into the top 8. It's my kind of magic. Just to see who can do the more degenerate thing. We have a match between Burn and Scred Red heading for top 8. We have a match of Eldrazi-tron versus Bant Eldrazi for top 8. So yeah, lots of different archetypes here. Now going to this match between the players, so Bryan Santiago on Merfolk, he's down a game. And it felt like that game we saw a real Jund thing happen, where he seized his opponent 3 times and then played a Tarmogoyf. You know, this is a formula that has been winning tournaments for Jund for a long time now.
Yep.
We both only have 2 cards. Tarmogoyf's probably better than whatever your card is.
Certainly.
So how does Bryan combat that sort of thing? He has cards like Ceremonious Rejection, Tectonic Edge, Unified Will. That's not really going to play very well. Does he have much that he can do?
So Relic of Progenitus is really good at policing the Delirium or reverse the Ulvenwald, as well as shrinking the size of Tarmogoyf, potentially getting that down to a 0/1 for some window of time.
Yeah.
Tiebiter Mage can also tap down Tarmogoyf. There's some argument for some number of Dispel, just so you can fight over things like spot removal. Certainly when Kolaghan's Command kills your Ether Vial and one of your 2-mana creatures, you want to fight over that one.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. Normally, I would have not liked Dispel against Jund decks. When you look at Austin's list, 3 Fatal Push, 2 Kolaghan's Command, 2 Tarfire, 1 Dismember, 1 Temur Battle Rage. That's 9 spells it can hit. Now, sure, it can't hit the 1 Abrupt Decay, but unlike, I guess, the bigger mana Jund and Abzans, there's a lot more low-end. The removal suite's very different here. It's much less in on Abrupt Decay. On Austin's side, he's got Fulminator Mage, Ancient Grudge, Nile Spellbomb, Collective Brutality, and then some one-ups. Surgical Extraction, Fatal Push, Maelstrom Pulse, an extra Liliana of the Veil. That would be his second. A Kozilek's Return and a Painful Truths.
Frequently, sweeper effects are a little too slow to combat Merfolk, so the Kozilek's Return's kind of a maybe. Fatal Push is a slam dunk. That one's coming in for sure. Maelstrom Pulse is really a question of how many and which 3-mana spells he wants to have in your deck. It can deal with multiple threats. This card's pretty powerful, arguably better than either of the Lilianas in this matchup. And Collective Brutality is actually totally reasonable. It is just a bad disfigure, but you want to have an answer to Master of Waves. It always deals with the Lords. This card's totally fine.
Yeah, it's just a 2-mana Tarfire, but that might be fine. I'm interested with the Lilianas, especially Liliana the Last Hope. So it seems in this matchup to run really hot and cold. There's a lot of 2/2s in the Merfolk deck, and it's no good there. However, when you see it eating Curse Catchers and Silvergill Adepts, I'm really into the card.
Yeah, it is a high ceiling, low floor. Possibly too much variance in that card to put it in such a good deck. This matchup is kind of good enough where I don't think you need to bother with swingy cards like that.
So game number 2 between the 2 players. Bryan Santiago on the play. He will take a mulligan. For Austin, looks like it's going to be a keep. Now, we have 4 matches here with top 8 implication. We're going to try to get through as many of them as we can. Among players here, a lot of players you've seen today. Both the 9-0s, Sky Goy and Trent Avera, playing for top 8. Josh Crow, we've seen him a lot on Scred, playing for top 8. Jake Perales, Kiter Sheen. You saw them the last 2 rounds, Eldrazi Tron and Bant Eldrazi. Ricky Lynn as well.
Eldrazi battles?
Hey, do you want the biggest Eldrazi or do you want the minions, so to speak? Like Ulamog or Reality Smasher? I like in the flavor fight, it's no contest. You know, Ulamog, they command the other Eldrazi. Not always how it plays out, though.
I've never cast an Ulamog. I got the opportunity to play an IQ with Busted Eldrazi.
I played a GP with it. Yeah, it's a...
And Ayavugan triple Eldrazi Mimic that's something else.
Curse Catcher, turn 1 from Santiago, keeping on 6. It's an interesting tournament for me. I beat all the non-Eldrazi decks and I lost all the mirrors.
Yeah.
Kind of says something about where the deck was.
That pretty much makes sense. Sounds like you need to work on your strategy for the mirror match.
The Curse Catcher's going to swing. Oh, man. Turn 2 Thought Knots are like, I didn't do that, I guess, in the mirrors.
Yeah, you learned your lesson.
I should have.
Bad news for our Merfolk player.
No second land. Kept a lot of 2-mana lords that could really pay off. Except Austin has a really controlling hand, multiple copies of Fatal Push and Inquisition of Kozilek alongside it. This is the kind of hand I've always said, like, when you mulligan to 6 against Jund, it is among the worst feelings because they're playing such an attrition game plan that you're feeding into what they want to do. Now, Death's Shadow is not always doing that, but with Austin's draw, it's going to feel that way.
Right.
Curse Catcher will swing for 1 more. Austin down to 18.
So Bryan made an attack here before playing a Lord. Likely the argument was he wanted the Fatal Push to happen on the Curse Catcher. It makes a little sense to wait to the second main phase to play the island for the turn.
What about this, Ryan? Silvergill Adept revealing Silvergill Adept for Santiago. That is just about perfect.
And now he's just straight playing around removal spells. If Austin wants to push these cards, that's fine.
I guess Liliana, the last hope, if Austin has one in hand on turn 3, would just be disgusting here.
Well, Austin does have one in hand.
Okay.
It's going to be pretty good.
Right. I mean, this is excellent against Fatal Push, but it's so bad against Innistrad Liliana. We have one result here. Trent Avera, your 9-0 player, playing Burn, played against Josh Crow, playing Scred Red for top 8. It's hard to Blood Moon out your opponent when they're playing Lava Spikes. Trent Avera into your top 8.
Yep, that one makes sense to me. Unfortunate for the Scred Red fans. I know that's one of the cooler decks in the format.
That deck's really neat. I like the card. I like it when Cold Snap cards see play. just oh yeah, those cards are weird. So go back to Austin. Can he make that Planeswalker? Yeah, and this is just horrible for Bryan. He's going to lose his Adept. Now, it was great that Adept drew a card. If Austin had any other follow-up, we could have had a really close game, actually.
Yeah.
But Curse Catcher counters instants and sorceries, nothing about Planeswalkers. And yeah, Bryan can chain Silvergill Adepts, but that's not going to do him any good.
Yeah, and Austin found himself in a game where he found the ceiling for Liliana. This is one of the games where it's just extremely powerful.
So now Bryan's forced into a different play. He has to play Master of the Pearl Trident. It pumps Curse Catcher, who then attacks Liliana. Certainly has to do this over Silvergill Adept, because he needs to not just completely lose to Liliana.
And now we're going to start seeing some Fatal Pushes.
Yeah, but this is the problem, right? Now the spot removal plan's great. Fatal Push takes care of Master. Liliana's going to shrink down Curse Catcher. Yeah, Bryan's going to have trouble keeping a card on the board here.
Bursavich actually has second Liliana in hand. If he runs out of spot removal, he could potentially plus on some Lord, cast a second Liliana, plus that one, and deal with a 2-toughness creature.
Well, with 2 Fatal, it's like Fulminator Mage in hand, he cracks the bauble. But with a Fatal Push and Fulminator Mages in hand, I mean, Austin's win condition could just be a Liliana emblem.
Yeah.
Bryan is so far away from being able to attack this card. Hawkins can actually just execute the game plan of killing all the creatures. Inquisition of Kozilek will be fired off. We see 4 2-drops. We have Master of the Pearl Trident, Tidebinder Mage, Lord of Atlantis, Silvergill Adept, Marrow Regery. So
frequently it would be the case that Silvergill Adept is the best card in this hand because it
Yeah.
replaces itself. Given that it dies to Liliana, the Last Hope, that changes the equation a little bit.
it replaces itself, but it takes Bryan's whole turn, and Austin can kill it for 0 mana, just plussing a Liliana, something he's going to do anyway. So Silvergill Adept basically cycles here.
Right. With Bryan stumbling on lands, that extra card draw does matter. But there is an argument to go against Silvergill Adept, which would usually be the slam dunk pick out of this hand.
And I like it. He's going to take Marrow Regery. That part makes sense. That's the most powerful card. If Bryan wants to spend his turn cantripping, fine. Now, the one thing, Austin does not have a creature or a threat yet. His best threat is just Liliana.
He's going to need to keep up a stream of spot removal here. He does have a Fatal Push in hand. That also lends itself to taking the Marrow Regery here. He would have to trigger a Revolt in order to Fatal Push that.
Austin, not yeah. So Liliana's at 3. It's still a long ways from making an emblem.
And land for Bryan there, Tectonic Edge. That's not the most effective tool in this matchup.
Back to Bursavich. Looks like he may have missed a bauble trigger. You can see a little disappointed on that one. Card is nice. Not completely necessary. He can recover from it. So Tectonic Edge from Santiago. A plus of Liliana on Master and just a pass for Bursavich. Now Cavern of Souls. So Bryan can start 2-spelling here. Maybe that will carry him back into the game.
Given that one of his lands is a Tectonic Edge, you can't just cast 2 Lords, which is pretty unfortunate. But he can cast Silvergill Adept and a Lord.
Right, so that's going to be fine. He plays Lord of Atlantis. Attacks for 3. Abrupt Decay on the Lord of Atlantis. So 0 power for the Master. Remember, it was shrunk by Liliana. Bryan will draw a card off Silvergill Adept then. Say go. So right now the Adept is a 3/2. So you see Austin's going to Fatal Push the Master so that next turn his Liliana can take care of the Adept.
Yep. And 4 lands for Santiago. None of them are Mutavault.
This game's looking really one-sided right now, as Austin's managing to kill all the creatures, but remember that he still doesn't have a threat. He needs to protect that Liliana for 2 more turns.
It's not looking like that's going to be too difficult, though. If Bryan had some Mutavaults, then you're starting to look at a pretty interesting game.
Fulminator Mage going to be able to play for Bursavich. This is out of his sideboard. He's going to go ahead and actually take care of the Tectonic Edge while it's tapped down. And then says go. Last card is a second Liliana. So I'm a little surprised that he made that play instead of just leaving it back as a blocker. I guess Tectonic Edge can try to hurt him on mana.
Bursavich has more lands than he needs, though. That play was pretty surprising.
Silvergill Adept will draw a card for Santiago. He showed a Merfolk in his hand. I think he was hoping to hit a land to double spell here, but could not. So that Fulminator Mage does look really good in hindsight. If there were a 4th land, Santiago would have drawn a card and then cast another Merfolk. Liliana Plus, we see in response, Santiago will Vapor Snag his own Merfolk. Not ideal, but it does replace itself.
Yeah, that Vapor Snag's not doing anything else of consequence. So.
And just lands for Bursavich, so as Liliana pluses to 6, he'll say go. Bryan needs to mount an attack this turn. If his creatures all die this turn, Liliana Emblem's going to happen. He's got Silvergill Adept again. So now he has a choice, right? He can play Silvergill Adept, and if he draws a land, then he gets to double spell. If he misses a land here, he's going to lose, though. Liliana is going to take care of his creature.
He found a Curse Catcher, actually.
Okay, so that works. Now, yes, Liliana is still just wrecking this game, but there's hope. Cast Curse Catcher says go. Go back to Bursavich. He cannot kill both of them with his Liliana. Up to 7, takes care of another Silvergill Adept. I think he may just be on lands, though.
Yeah.
He has another Liliana the Last Hope, but he certainly doesn't want to replace with the 7 loyalty Planeswalker.
Right.
And now Bryan can unload, draws a 4th land, and it's a 4th blue source.
And now we might have a game.
Yeah, Master of the Pearl Trident pumps Curse Catcher. We absolutely might have a game. Swings for 2 at Liliana. Deny that emblem. Can Austin kill it?
4 p.m. Legacy Challenge. Registration closes for Legacy Challenge at 3:50. So this is the last call to register.
He does. He has the Fatal Push. Curse Catcher is gone. Now that means Coast should be clear for that -7. Austin can get an emblem, and he'll start getting a swarm of zombies.
Infinite zombies, assuming an infinite amount of time and number of turns.
It's like true of any increasing function. But yeah, it's a lot. That's like saying Goblin Rabble Master makes infinite goblins.
It does.
I mean, all right, back over to Austin.
Especially because Austin has that second Liliana.
Yeah,
No reason not to emblem.
picks up Colligan's command for the turn. And he's going to start some fetch lands. Now remember, as far as mana producing lands go, Austin Bursavich's deck only has 6 actual mana producers. So you see he has 6 lands in play. All these fetches, as long as he aligns them correctly, would work. He's found there his remaining 3 lands. But this means this is it. Any other fetch land he draws just isn't a card.
Mm-hmm.
Goes down to 8, head to Shock for Stomping Ground. Yeah, so Foothills gets Forest, Bloodstained Mire gets Swamp, Foothills gets Stomping Ground. That works. We see Colligan's command killing a Merfolk and having Bryan discard his last card. Liliana makes an emblem. Replacement Liliana shrinks down the Tidebinder Mage. Austin makes 2 zombies and says go. Mutavault for Santiago. That does not play well here.
Mm-hmm. It would have been great much, much earlier.
Yeah, it would. Back when he was getting beaten up by Liliana, it would have been so good for him to have a Mutavault.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, I mean, he needs Island Walk and very quickly. The ground is not going to be safe to attack really ever again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he needs Spreading Seas and a Lord that grants Island Walk.
-2 from Liliana the Last Hope will mill 2 and put the Fulminator Mage back into Bursavich's hand. And now he'll play the 2/2. It's both a blocker for Tidebinder Mage and a removal spell for the Mutavault. Mm-hmm. Looking really strong here. Austin says go, gets 4 more zombies from that emblem. 2 more turns of Liliana emblem should do it.
Infinite zombies.
And Bryan draws an island and extends the hand. So Austin Bursavich is your winner here on table 6. They will end the tournament at 12-3. And now he's going to have to wait. He is a favorite to get into the top 8, but it is not going to be a clean cut. There will be tiebreakers.
Yeah,
so.
tiebreaker sweat there for Santiago. Well played. He did miss a second land drop in that game.